Moving on, and unemployment numbers out today. There was a significant uptick in the unemployment rate, up to 5.3% from 5.1%. Underemployment as well, up to 8.6%. The participation rate up 0.1. And here's the good news though, full-time jobs added. This is a big number for 1 month, giving, of course, the caveat that sometimes these numbers bounce around a bit, but 46,200 jobs created for the month. Part-time jobs down 32,000, but that net 13,500 jobs created number, that's a decent one, but it's the full-time. When you look at that troubling underemployment, every time we're adding full-time jobs, that is a good thing. Earlier I spoke to Shadow Employment Minister Brendan O'Connor. Brendan O'Connor, thanks for your time. Unemployment up, but 46,000 full-time jobs added to the economy. That's a pretty impressive figure.
Yeah, you have to look at the overall numbers. It's the highest underemployed Australians ever, at almost 1.2 million. And since, in the last 12 months, there's been 140,000 more underutilised Australians. That is, there's almost 50,000 more unemployed, and there's more than 90,000, or thereabouts, 90,000 underemployed in the last 12 months. So, of course, the labour market grows because the population grows, but you do have to look at the underemployment. And that's one of the reasons why there's slack in the labour market, because the only thing the government's relying upon for wages to go up is a tighter economy, a tighter labour market. That is not happening because of that record high underemployment. So you do have to look at more than one metric, and of course the unemployment rate went up, which I think is a testament to the problem we have. It went from 5.1 to 5.3. So there was a net employment growth of 12,000. That's not enough in our population growth to keep up, and that's why the rate went up from 5.1 to 5.3.
Well, the rate going up, though, of course, affected by participation. If you look at this month in isolation, if this were to be repeated, this is, even if you think it's not a trend, this is a good month, surely, if you're seeing 46,000 full-time jobs added. It's way ahead of population.
Yeah, I'd like to see that, but if you look at the overall trend, underemployment is at its highest ever. That means there are far more people, right, that are almost 1.2 million Australians looking for more work. That means that whilst I welcome any job, and certainly a full-time job, but overall there are 1.2 million Australians looking for more work and not being able to find it, and that's partly why we have that's one of the reasons why we have a historically low wage growth, persistently low wage growth, which of course the government doesn't want to talk about. And nor do they want to talk about job losses when they happen. They like to take credit for job increases, but when something happens with Holden dealerships or other parts of other industries, they're not really taking responsibility for that, are they?
The issue, though, of wages is one thing, employment's another, obviously, and they have that relation. But what would happen right now if we increased penalty rates? That wouldn't bolster employment, would it?
Well, it would certainly mean that more money would go into the hands of workers, and that would be spent almost all of it would be spent in our economy. See, the problem with, it's very important that we have profitable companies, but if the share of the gain is going to shareholders predominantly rather than workers, is that a lot of that money is going out of the economy, going out of the country, in fact. Well over the majority of shareholders of our mining industry are from overseas. Now, that's important for for foreign capital and so on, but when you see this complete imbalance between rising profits and low wages, you know that money's not being spent in the economy. That's one of the reasons why we have an anemic economy, low growth, and that also means, of course, economic growth is low. So I do think there's a correlation between low wages and low economic outcomes. Right. Yes, I do.
If you're talking about companies there or profits too high compared to workers, what companies or what sectors are too profitable at the moment?
Well, it's not a session that someone's too profitable. I want to see companies be profitable. But I'm talking about the comparison, what's happened with the rate of profit growth compared to the rate of wage growth. And we are at a point where the rate of profit growth is exceeds the rate of wage growth enormously.
Is that everywhere, or are you saying a particular sector or company?
It's not everywhere, but I'm talking about the macroeconomic data. And we can look at each different sector, but I'm certainly saying that profit growth is doing much better, much better than wage growth, and that's the recent trend. Just like workers are getting less dividend out of economic output than our company profits.
But where is profit growth too high then, in your opinion?
Well, as I say, it's not about being too high, it's about who's getting the share, right? Where is the share?
Okay, well, where is the share right now? What sectors?
But I'm not, no, because I'm not going to have you try to characterise me attacking growth. I'm not against profit growth. I'm talking about we need to do something to lift wages, and no one seems to be caring about that. We have large companies either intentionally or inadvertently underpaying their staff legally millions and millions and millions of dollars, right? That's just based on the current law. I mean, that is not even happening.
That in a minute.
Well, I'm happy to talk about that
in a minute. Yeah, but just on this talk about, you know, share of money, where is it going, profits versus workers as well. Are you saying there's a wage issue aside from penalty rates in any particular sector?
Of course there are. I mean, bargaining has collapsed in this country. Employers are finding other ways not to bargain with their workforce, which means that we're seeing a fall. So whether it's...
But where are wages too low, for example? What sectors?
Well, firstly, the wage growth is too low everywhere, right? That's the first thing. So it's not what sector. Almost every sector, I could probably find somewhere there may be some exceptions, but overall, you know, wage growth is low. That is just a fact. It's axiomatic. It's not me saying that. That is just the case. We've got the lowest wage growth on record in this country, presided over by Scott Morrison. That's the truth of it. And in terms of the share of the dividend, workers are getting less.
But most people talk about that issue with wage growth being a productivity one. When you say the share of the dividend, workers are getting less, so that's a separate issue. Are you saying that's across the economy again, or
it's both? It's certainly both. Of course, our productivity is low. That's partly a failure to innovate, a failure to bargain. I think sometimes the employer is, you know, not really getting much out of their bargaining because they refuse to bargain. And in saving the pennies by not providing wage growth, they're losing pounds in terms of innovation and change that could occur consensually amongst workers, unions and employers.
On that issue of underpayment, we've had Wesfarmers come out and say, look, don't punish us for honest mistakes. Fair enough?
I don't know the facts of that case. It's hard to believe that a whole human resource department of a very big company would not know that there were just fundamental breaches of the law. But I don't know the facts of that case. But it's becoming increasingly obvious that very large companies that have a lot of human resource staff seem to be making what they say to be honest mistakes. If they'd made such honest mistakes with their tax, I think the tax office would have something to say about that. So I think you'd have to look at the facts. Certainly there are many employers who do inadvertently underpay, and I think that's more likely to happen amongst small businesses who don't have the expertise and wherewithal on occasion. I think it's harder to credibly argue that larger enterprises can't read an award.
So on small business, do you have some sympathy? Some of them talk about 11 different penalty rates, for example, just in hospitality. Is the system too complex?
I have sympathy for small business, and often they have difficulty navigating many areas, including tax, for example. But I think the system is far more rationalised than it once was. We used to have 4,000 awards. We now pretty much have like 40 that are used. So it's a lot easier. If it can be made simple without unfairly treating workers, of course we should. But I think it's an excuse that's almost made by reflex these days. And frankly, for larger enterprises to try and argue they can't read an award when they have got lawyers and human resource managers is hard to accept as a credible excuse.
Jim Chalmers turning on to his thoughts today around the wellbeing budget, so more of an emphasis on things such as social and environmental factors, not just a focus on GDP. Is that a good approach?
I think so. And it's not a new approach, but I think it's good that Jim's raised it. You could argue it goes right back to Thomas Jefferson's Declaration of Independence comments or statements when he talked about one of the inalienable rights of people would be the pursuit of happiness. So the idea that we measure or seek to measure well-being is in many ways is an old one. And I think if we can, properly, more precisely explain how we are going, both quantifiably and through qualitative research, then we should do so. And I think what Jim's saying is there's other measurements. You just take unemployment, for example. The unemployment rate is important, but it is only one metric and it doesn't tell the full picture. That's why you have to talk about underemployment, because that describes the labour market more precisely. And I think the more metrics you use to explain how you are going, but in particular how people are, well, how they're feeling, whether in fact they feel they've got a good quality of life, matters. It matters for policymakers to understand whether we're achieving our outcome, and our outcome is not economic growth for the sake of it. Is the real goal is, do our people feel good? Are they happy in their lives? Do they feel content? Do they feel secure? I think these things do matter, and therefore I do agree with Jim that we should be looking at other ways to measure that.
Yeah, will people care as much about reducing poverty, improving mental health across the community, even if it doesn't apply to them, more than a bump in their own pay packet?
Maybe they will, and I think people are generally, I think they do think of others too. I think it's easier to think of others when you're secure. I think it's harder when your life is chaotic, or when your employment's insecure, or when you're being underpaid, or you've got a tenancy arrangement where you're not feeling that you've got a secure accommodation. Then it's hard to think of others. But of course, the more we can improve the lot of the majority of Australians, I believe it's more likely that they're going to consider other people too, don't you?
It sounds like the start of an interesting debate. Brendan O'Connell, we'll see where it goes. Thanks for your time today.
Thanks, Tom.